Good morning and welcome to the Laura B. versus the Pleasant Valley Community School District and the Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency. This case has been decided by Administrative Law Judge Kathy May Skinner in September of 1998. It is presented by myself, Mike Ross, a grad student of the University of Northern Iowa, in the expectation of a special ed law class delivered by Dr. Susan Etscheitz. Today I'm going to give you a little bit of history about Laura B. She is the plaintiff in the case. Laura B. is a ninth grade girl who had suffered through some poor academic performance and progress. What is particular about that is that at the beginning of ninth grade year, she was an A and B student, but really by the end of ninth grade saw a drastic decline in her grades. Along with that decline, there were some discipline issues that arose as well from her behavior, and those resulted in suspensions, a little over 50 suspensions, Also, during her ninth grade year, there was some theft from home that involved a large amount of cash, and while the principal administration of the district was doing some investigation, it escalated Laura into threats of injury to herself, her parents, and school officials. It resulted in a hospitalization at a local medical facility here in the Quad Cities, as well as some stress that caused by this interaction with her family. Many of the social interactions at home and school were poor. Shortly after being released from the mental health facility, she returned to school, and on the same day that she returned, she received another suspension for fighting in retaliation of a name calling in regards to her being a, quote, psycho bitch, unquote. During the ninth grade year, there is one known suicide attempt, and the parent committed their daughter to the hospital for evaluation for 3 days. That means in the total of ninth grade year, this student received 2 hospitalizations, several suspensions, and not one time did parents ever get notified or request any IDEA services or programs. Laura in 10th grade continued her grade decline. We also know that she had made a second known suicide attempt, which resulted in the school nurse calling family and the appropriate services. Alcohol and drugs were also involved. In her 10th grade year, they were brought on campus, which resulted in the beginning stages of an expulsion investigation and hearing. Before she could be reinstated, she would need to be seen by a local agency that provides those services to prove that she is of sound body and mind and able to go back to school. However, she was not able to attend that hearing or to hear that information because she had received another suspension and was not able to attend. She also received or made threats of violence with access to weapons. So upon being confronted for some behavior, she threatened to kill herself and her parents and the school officials. Well, at that point, it involved local courts and law enforcement, and she was invited to extend a 8-day stint at the local health facility here for mental health evaluation. And again, during her 10th grade year, parents nor the school discussed anything about the programs and services associated with the IDEA and the FAP. So it's pretty unfortunate. Other relevant information that might help you make some decisions or help you understand this case is after she stayed in the hospital for 8 days, she was ordered to attend a state mental health institute in Mount Pleasant. However, in lieu of attending there, the family was allowed to transfer Laura to the Wilson Academy in Faribault, Minnesota. She attended the academy for about 45 days, and upon her release by her doctor, it was recommended that she continue individual and family therapy, as well as take some medication for her major depressive disorder with some psychotic features, which again turns around into creating and having interpersonal difficulties with parents, schools, officials, other problems at schools, acting out, including substance abuse. So she did have a diagnosis. It did come a little bit later, after the 10th grade year. And while she was at the Wilson Academy in Faribault, she also was able to develop an IEP. The state of Minnesota passed that along to her family upon her entering back into the public school system here in the Quad Cities. That was the position of Laura and her family. Now, this is the position of the Pleasant Valley Community School District and the Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency. At no time during the 1994 through 1996 school years were referrals ever made formally or informally to teachers or other professionals at the school. Very little records, academic records other than grades, were provided by the school in this case. Only several letters detailing disciplinary infractions, which came mostly down to attendance. At one point, a doctor had prescribed some medication to Laura and felt that for Laura to own her disability, that she would be allowed to carry medication, which would be apparently a violation of the school board policy. But at one time, it may have been confirmed that it would be okay. So there's some discrepancy there about that. The superintendent, now the superintendent, then principal at the time, thought that Laura's behavior was somewhat normal within reason, that many students sometimes see a grade decrease in high school, that some peers act out and look for attention and seeking behaviors. So he felt that that was just somewhat normal, quote unquote. The district had no records that they had ever received from parents regarding mental health commitments, treatment, or counsel recommendations, although they may, again, memory lapses, may have been notified of these issues, but they had no record of actually receiving it. The AEA also defended itself in saying that they didn't know anything about the case prior to her junior and senior year, and that very seldom in the Quad Cities are districts asked to pay for therapy services because of the perceived social stigma attached to those. He also indicated that he follows the state indicators and state law in regards to special education services. And he went on record saying that psychiatric infractions are not always indicators of the need for special ed services, as well as behavior infractions are not always indicators of the need for special ed services. However, the AEA indicated that with what was known in the community, that the school should have done some follow-up with the parents regarding IDEA. Here's kind of a timeline of Laura B's case. Again, 9th grade, 1994, 2 hospitalizations and some private therapy. That continued to 10th grade, where she received another 2 hospitalizations, continued private therapy, and then a 45-day stint at a residential treatment facility up in Minnesota. By the time she walked out of her residential treatment center, she was ready to enter the 11th grade. However, they were a little slow and apprehensive about having her go back to the same school district in which she was assigned to initially. So she went to a neighboring district. The Bettendorf Community School District has a high school there. They welcomed her and was able to meet the needs of her now developed IEP, which included some self-regulation skills, a little bit of classwork, some checking in, those types of issues. And she was able to manage that, as well as her medication from the 11th and 12th grade year, in which at the point in May of 1998, she had graduated. So the appointed law judge needs to decide whether or not the school should have referred Laura for SPED services during 1994-95 and 1995 and 96 school years. Law Judge Mace also needs to decide whether or not the school should be responsible for paying costs of the private psychotherapy that incurred for the 1 year in the tune of about $11,600. Law Judge Mace also has to decide whether the school is responsible for paying costs of the residential therapy incurred for those 3 months. That cost is right around $68,000. So there is some money there to be spent. Here are the applicable laws. I won't get into too much detail, but we go into the need to make sure that we are exercising all of our general education in interventions first before we roll out a full and individual evaluation that's guaranteed under the Iowa Code of Chapter 281, 41.480, Paragraph 2. The child find requirements mandate that schools, public school staff locate, evaluate, and identify children who potentially meet the eligibility of IDEA, including homeless children, wards of the state, and children in private school. Schools should not wait for a parent to bring their child's problem to their attention, as given by the case in the Ninth Circuit in 1996, where the school felt that that would be something that they should have done. Related services, this is probably the main point of contention, that the services of counseling, therapy, and in-house treatment are not necessarily required by the school district and under their dime, because it must be tied to their disability and they must be able to benefit from the special education. So those are two different separations, that if the related service must be related to their disability and their ability to benefit from special education. My personal reaction to this case was that there were several red flags that the that the Pleasant Valley Community School District did not take in order to assist the family and ultimately Laura in being more successful in school. There were no documentation of general education interventions used. There were 19 disciplinary reports in 9th grade, which is a kind of a from one student, I would guess, an indicator of a need for more personal investigation. In 10th grade, there was those 20 disciplinary reports. Both lack of communication from school and parents. I didn't want to let the parents off the hook because they know that they have these problems with their daughter and could have advocated for their daughter a little bit more, as well as the school advocating for that particular student as well. Lots of memory lapses, I'm calling them, from the from the school. And I do think that we probably need to, as a community, address the stigmatization of special ed services and mental health services. So that's what I came with the case of Laura B. versus the Pleasant Valley Community School District and the Mississippi Bend Area Education Agency. Some questions for you to ponder are... not yet. Sorry, we won't ponder those yet. We're going to go back to the ALJ findings. Justice Mace thought that the parents should win on the issue of whether or not Laura should be had been referred to the possible special education evaluation, instruction, or services. That the school prevails on the issue that they cannot be held liable for the private counseling fees of $11,000. The school prevails on the issue of whether or not they shouldn't be required to pay for the residential facility in the tune of $68,000. So parents were right. Something should have been done long before the private counseling and the residential treatment options. Here are your ponderings. What ideas or promotions will you implement to lessen the stigma of SPED or mental health service of students in your school? What procedural safeguards will you enact in your building to be confident that all necessary documentation is complete? Share a time where you wanted to advocate for someone but was hindered for whatever reason in doing so. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the show. We're right out of time. Bye.